The moment an avoidant realizes you have truly lost interest, their first reaction is panic covered in denial. On the surface they act unbothered, they act cool. They act like nothing in their world has shifted, but underneath that calm face there is a sudden fear that grabs them by the throat. Because the steady presence they took for granted has gone quiet, and silence from you is not what they are used to. They are used to your heart chasing, your energy reaching, your messages filling in every gap they created. So when that stops, something deep inside them jolts awake. Even if they refuse to name it, they notice first in the tiny changes. The good morning text that never arrives, the instant replies that turn into hours of delay, the way you stop double texting, stop explaining yourself, stop asking if they are okay. And at the beginning they tell themselves a story so they do not have to feel the panic. They say, "You are just busy. You're being dramatic. You always come back." They scroll past your name in their phone and feel that little twist in their stomach. But they brush it off. They tell themselves they are above it, that they do not need you like that. And yet, their mind goes back to you again and again, more than before. Precisely because you are no longer guaranteed. They open your chat, see the last message sitting there unanswered. And for the first time in a long time they feel something uncomfortable. Not annoyance, not boredom, but a kind of pressure in the chest that whispers, something has changed, and it is not them, it is you. That is where the panic lies, in the realization that the emotional constant they built their avoidance around is no longer constant. That the person who used to absorb their distance with understanding is no longer available on demand. That the person who used to bend and wait and explain has quietly stood up and walked back to themselves, and they do not know what to do with that. Inside, it sounds like this: did I push too far? Did I misjudge them? Did I just lose something I assumed I would always have? But instead of sitting with those questions, instead of letting that discomfort crack them open, they reach for denial like a reflex. They say to themselves that they never asked you to care, that you were the one who felt too much, that it is better this way. And yet their body does not believe that story, because the nervous system does not lie. It feels the sudden absence of your presence, the way their days feel slightly emptier, the way their victories do not hit as hard when they no longer have you to tell, the way their bad days feel heavier because they know deep down that the person who always understood them is no longer on standby. They might scroll your social media and tell themselves they are just curious, not affected, not invested, but the truth is, they are checking if you seem happier, checking if you seem lighter, checking if someone else now stands where they once did, and each photo, each post, each sign that your life is moving without them triggers another small wave of panic, quickly buried, quickly numbed, but there. They remember the way you looked at them, when you still believed in them, the way you listened when they did open up, the way you gave them grace when they shut down, the way you stayed after they pushed, and that memory collides with the reality that you are no longer doing any of that, and something in them starts to break, quietly, privately, in the spaces no one else can see. On the outside, they double down on the performance. They may act colder, make jokes about you, pretend they never really cared, post things that scream, "I am fine, I am free, I am unbothered," and if you see that, it can stab you. It can make you question whether any of it meant anything at all. But you need to understand that performance is armor, not truth. Their pride does not know how to say, "I am scared that I have lost you," so it says the opposite. It says, "I don't need you, I never did." But their habits betray them. The late-night scrolls, the saved photos, the half-written messages sitting in their drafts, the way your name lingers in the back of their mind when certain songs play, when they walk past familiar places, when they lie in bed and the distractions fade. That is the panic, not always loud, not always dramatic, but steady, pulsing beneath every attempt to act like your absence is meaningless. You spent so long believing that they held all the power because they were the one who was distant, because they were the one who could pull away, because they were the one you were trying to win. But the moment you genuinely lose interest, the power shifts without you even trying, because what they were taking for granted was not just your presence, it was your belief in them, your willingness to stay soft in a connection that was hard on you, your ability to see past their walls and still show up, and when that belief starts to die in you. They feel it, whether they admit it or not. They notice that your eyes no longer light up the same, that your voice is calmer, more neutral, that you no longer chase clarity from them, that you no longer ask where this is going. You simply adjust your direction and go, and that terrifies them, because control for an avoidant often comes from knowing you will always be there, and suddenly that control is gone, replaced with a new, unfamiliar reality where your life does not revolve around their inconsistency. Their panic, wrapped in denial, might drive them to test the waters, to send you a casual message, to poke at your boundaries, to see if the door is still open. But you will feel the difference this time. You will feel that underneath the jokes and the small talk is a person who is no longer as sure of their grip on you. And that is where your courage must rise. Because this is the moment where old you would rush to reassure them, rush to prove you still care, rush to pour love into the space they finally feel. But the version of you who has started to heal knows better, knows that their fear does not equal readiness, that their panic does not equal commitment, that their sudden awareness of your absence does not erase the long season where they treated your presence like it was temporary. You can let their reaction inform you. You can let it validate that you did matter, that you were not crazy, that your love left an imprint, but you are no longer required to let that reaction dictate your next move, because the moment you lost interest was not a moment of weakness. It was the moment you finally remembered that your heart is not something to be borrowed, tested, or taken for granted. It is something to be met, fully and consistently, by someone who does not have to wait until you are gone to realize what you were. When an avoidant senses your energy shifting away, when they feel that subtle but undeniable change in the way you show up, they often try to re-engage you without admitting to themselves, or to you, that this is exactly what they are doing. They are not going to come in with a big confession. They are not going to say, "I miss you. I am scared I lost you." Instead, they move in sideways. They send a casual message out of nowhere, a meme, "Hey, how have you been? This reminded me of you." And on the surface it looks light, playful, harmless, but underneath that tiny message is a much bigger question. Do I still have access to you? Are you still there if I reach? Can I still pull on the cord that used to tug you back toward me? Because what they are really checking is not your schedule. It is your emotional availability, your willingness to still be the one who drops everything when they appear. They might pop up on your social media, like a story, react with a random emoji, comment on something small, and if you did that to them it would be seen as nothing. But when they do it after a season of distance, it is deliberate. It is them testing the water without having to say, "I care that you have gone quiet, and it is bothering me more than I expected," because that would require a level of vulnerability they are not ready to stand in. Instead of straightforwardness, they use breadcrumbs, tiny crumbs of attention dropped in your path, a late night, you up, a random, "I heard our song today," a joke only the two of you understand. And every one of those crumbs is a way of asking, "Are you still emotionally available for me, even after everything, even after my silence, even after the way I mishandled your heart?" If you respond quickly, if you match their energy, if you light back up the way you used to, it reassures them, not necessarily about you, but about their power. They feel the familiar sense of control return, the comfort of knowing that no matter how far they pulled away, you were still there waiting to be pulled back in. Your fast reply tells their ego, "Nothing has really changed. I can still keep my distance," and they will accept it. And even though part of them may genuinely enjoy reconnecting, the deeper truth is that they are not coming back to offer certainty. They are coming back to see if the door is still open, to see if you will still play the role you have always played, the one where you chase, you explain, you forgive, you make it easy for them to avoid ever fully stepping up. They might bring up old memories. "Remember that time we went there? Remember that night we stayed up talking? Remember what you said about me then?" And those memories are not random. They are emotional fishing lines, thrown into the past to hook the feelings that used to bind you to them. Because if they can get you reminiscing, they can get you reattached. And if they can get you reattached, they can relax. Not because they are suddenly ready to give you what you deserve, but because the panic that rose when you pulled away has been soothed by the reassurance that they still matter to you. What they are almost never doing in these moments is saying, "I was wrong. I did not value you properly. I want to show up differently now." That kind of clarity would require them to step out of their comfort zone, to own their behavior, to risk rejection. And that is precisely what their avoidant wiring is built to avoid. So instead they move in the gray zone, where nothing is clearly stated, but everything is implied. Where you feel a little closer again, but still do not know where you stand. Where you sense there is something behind the message, but you are left to decode it on your own. And this is where you get sucked back in emotionally, because your heart fills in all the blanks they refuse to fill with honesty. You take that little, "Hey stranger," and translate it as, "They miss me." You take a heart emoji on your story and translate it as, "They still care deeply." You take a breadcrumb and build a feast out of it in your mind, not because you are naive, but because you are starved for consistency, starved for clarity, starved for someone to finally meet you at the level you have been standing at this whole time. From their side, the testing, the casual reconnecting, the sudden interest when you start to pull back, is not always a conscious game. Often they do not even fully understand their own motives. They just know that when your energy was focused on them, they felt a certain safety, a certain validation, a certain comfort, even if they pushed it away. And now that it is slipping, they feel unsteady, so they reach for the quickest way to get that feeling back without having to do the deeper work of change. They would rather send a low-risk message and see if you bite than risk a real conversation where they might have to say, "I was emotionally unavailable, and I want to do better." Because if they say that, then they have to follow through. And if there is one thing an unhealed avoidant fears almost as much as intimacy, it is failing at intimacy in front of someone who matters. So they hover at the edges instead, dipping in and out, close enough to feel your warmth again, far enough that they can still convince themselves they are not really vulnerable, that they can walk away at any time, that they are not as invested as you are, even if their behavior in these moments betrays just how much your withdrawal shook them. You need to remember in these moments that being tested is not the same as being chosen. A check in text is not the same as a commitment. A nostalgic message is not the same as a plan for the future. A random, "I miss talking to you," is not the same as, "I am ready to show up differently now." And it is so easy, especially when you still care, to fall back into old patterns the moment they reappear. To let their small efforts erase months of neglect in your mind, to tell yourself, "This is the sign I was waiting for." But ask yourself, what are they actually offering beyond the reassurance that you still respond? Because if all they are looking for is proof that they still have emotional access to you, that is not love, that is comfort, and your heart is worth more than being someone's comfort they tap into only when they feel you slipping away, when they cannot pull you back with crumbs, when your energy does not rush toward them the way it used to. Many avoidants protect their ego by quietly rewriting the entire story in their mind, and this is where things become deeply painful and confusing for you. Because instead of sitting with the simple, uncomfortable truth, "I lost someone real because I did not show up," they reach for a narrative that hurts less to their pride. They begin to act like you were the one who was too much, too emotional, too demanding, too dramatic. They may act like what you had was never that serious. They may downplay your importance. They may tell themselves, and maybe even other people, that they were the one who chose to pull away, that you were chasing them, that you misunderstood the connection. All of this is a defense, a shield their ego builds to avoid facing the reality that they are the one who mishandled something valuable. And that realization feels unbearable to them, because it crashes straight into the shame they already carry, the belief that they always ruin good things. So instead of letting that awareness wake them up, they twist the story in a way that keeps them feeling powerful, or at least less exposed. They tell themselves you were too intense, when you were simply asking for clarity. They label your need for communication as clingy, when you were just trying to understand where you stood. They frame your hurt as drama, when it was actually a natural response to feeling neglected, and bit by bit they turn you into the problem, not because you are, but because it is easier to point the finger at you than to turn it toward themselves. On the outside, this often looks like cold detachment. Like they have moved on effortlessly, they might become extra casual about you, roll their eyes if your name is mentioned, talk as if they were never really invested. They might even rewrite history out loud. We were never really together. It wasn't that deep. They were obsessed with me, and if any of that gets back to you, it stings in a way that goes straight to your core, because you remember the late-night conversations, the way they held you, the softness in their eyes when they let their guard down, the moments that felt sacred to you, and hearing them talk like it was nothing can make you question your own memory. It can make you wonder if you made it all up, if you were delusional, if you really did blow everything out of proportion. And this is exactly why this ego rewrite is so damaging, because it does not just protect them from pain. It pushes that pain into you. You become the one holding all the doubt, all the confusion, all the self-blame, while they get to stay protected behind a story where they were always in control. But deep down, beneath that performance, they know it is not the full truth. They know they leaned on you. They know they opened up to you in ways they do not do with everyone. They know you were not some random person who just caught feelings. They know you showed up in ways their own behavior did not deserve. And that knowledge is exactly what makes them need to rewrite the story. Because if they admitted that you were real, that you were good, that you were loyal, then they would also have to admit that losing you was not an accident, it was a consequence. So they double down, not because they feel nothing, but because feeling everything and taking responsibility would demand change, and change terrifies them. It would mean looking honestly at their patterns, at the way they run when things get intimate, at the way they shut down instead of communicating, at the way they accept your unconditional support while offering you conditional presence. It would mean admitting that they are as much a source of their own loneliness as anyone who ever hurt them. And that is a level of self-accountability their ego is not ready for, so it chooses the cheaper comfort of denial. I didn't really care. They weren't right for me. I knew it wouldn't last. And every time they repeat those lines, they are trying to hypnotize themselves into believing that they did not just sabotage one of the safest connections they have ever had. The tragedy is that while they are busy protecting their ego, you are left protecting your sanity, trying to make sense of how someone who once leaned on your love can act so indifferent, trying to reconcile their public story with your private reality, trying not to let their version of events crush your sense of worth. And this is where your work begins, because you cannot stop them from rewriting the story in their own head, but you can stop letting that false story define you. You can hold on to what you know to be true, that you showed up wholeheartedly, that your feelings were real, that your needs were reasonable, that your desire for clarity was healthy, and that someone else's refusal to face themselves will never be proof that you asked for too much. What hurts them most is not your silence in the moment, but the delayed grief that hits later, when they finally realize that your attention is no longer something they can casually depend on, when it sinks in that your name still lives in their mind, but your energy has moved on, and that gap between memory and reality becomes their private torment. Because for a long time, after you start to pull away, they are not really feeling the full truth of what is happening. They are still living in the old pattern, assuming you will circle back the way you always did, that this distance is temporary, that you are just upset or busy or trying to prove a point. They tell themselves that you will eventually message, that you will eventually soften, that you will eventually be the one to reopen the conversation. Because that is what has always happened. So at first your silence does not break them. It confuses them, annoys them, maybe even pricks their pride. But it does not fully reach their heart yet. It is only when time starts stretching out, when days pass, and you are still not reaching in the way you used to, when they accidentally stumble on a piece of your life, where they are no longer the central character, that the grief begins to take shape, slow and heavy, And because they do not have the tools to process it, it comes out sideways, in irritability, in scrolling, in overworking, in numbing habits, anything but tears, anything but the sentence they most need to say, which is, I lost someone who showed up for me, and I did not show up back. They might see your picture and feel their stomach drop. They might hear your name and feel that split second of ache. They might remember a specific moment, a joke, a look, a night only the two of you shared, and for just a breath, they allow themselves to feel the weight of what is gone. But almost immediately their defenses rush in. They say it was never that serious. They say you were dramatic. They say it is better this way, because if they stay in that honest space too long, the guilt and sadness would swallow them, and they have spent their whole life avoiding that level of emotional intensity. Your grief exploded early. Theirs arrives late. You grieved loudly. You cried. You talked. You journaled. You questioned your worth. You stared at your phone. You went through the full storm while they were still pretending the sky was clear. And that is why it feels so unfair when you see that their life seems unchanged. They look fine. They sound fine. They may even seem lighter without you. And you sit with the thought, how can I be this shattered while they seem untouched? But what you do not see is that for avoidant people, feelings often land on delay. They outrun the initial wave. They distract themselves. They throw themselves into routine. And then, one ordinary day, the reality arrives not with drama but with a quiet, crushing clarity. Maybe they see you laughing in a photo with friends and realize they are no longer part of your stories. Maybe someone mentions you in passing and the conversation moves on, and they realize how far away they now are from your world. Maybe they are alone on a night when they used to be talking to you, and the silence is louder than it has ever been. That is when the delayed grief sinks in, not as a meltdown, but as this gnawing, inescapable awareness that they stood in front of something rare and slowly pushed it away. They remember the way you used to answer on the first ring, and now their calls would feel intrusive. They remember the way you used to send long, thoughtful messages, and now your replies, if they come at all, are brief and self-contained. They remember that there was a time when your entire body lit up at the sight of their name, and now the thought that your heart might no longer jump for them is like a shard of glass lodged under their ribs. Every memory they once took comfort in becomes proof of what they no longer have access to, and that is when the grief begins to move from their mind down into their chest. They do not talk about it, because talking about it would mean admitting to someone, even to themselves, that they were not just unlucky in love, they were an active participant in losing it. And that is a level of responsibility their unhealed parts have never practiced holding. So instead of saying, I miss them and I regret what I did, they say, it was for the best. They say we were not compatible. They say they wanted too much. But those sentences taste hollow even as they repeat them. And in the quiet moments the truth creeps back in. You wanted honesty, not perfection, consistency, not control, communication, not chaos, and they could not give that. Not because you were asking for the impossible, but because they were unwilling or unable to face their own fear. That truth hurts them in a way denial cannot fully cover. It shows up when they see you reclaiming your life, when they notice you no longer orbit around their moods, when they see that you have built joy in places that have nothing to do with them. There is a sting in realizing that the person they once believed would always be there has now proven, to both of you, that they will not always be available for half love that they chose themselves, and that is where your power lies, not in making them grieve, but in no longer allowing their unfinished healing to dictate whether or not you get to move on. The delayed grief is theirs to carry. The nights they lie awake wondering if they misjudged you, the moments they feel tempted to reach out and stop themselves, the recognition that your attention was not just comforting background noise. It was a gift they misused, and while a part of them might wish for another chance, another reset, another version of you who is still waiting by the door, the reality staring back at them is that you are already walking down a different path, and the door they kept assuming would always stay cracked open has finally closed.